in Kyrgyzstan. On the field, the U.S. stays in the game, but their World Cup game draw with Slovenia is stirring some controversy. And on the front lines, the actor-director Kevin Costner joins Louisiana official and BP executives in the fight against the Gulf oil disaster. Hello and welcome. I'm Colleen McEdwards here at CNN Center, and you're watching World Report. Well, there is a clearer picture now of the magnitude of the crisis that is going on in Kyrgyzstan. And the growing number of people affected by the ethnic violence there has triggered an urgent plea from the United Nations. Here's a closer look. The UN is appealing for $71 million now to help hundreds of thousands of people who are fleeing the riots. The UN says some 300,000 people have been displaced internally and up to 100,000 fled to Uzbekistan. And there is a new estimate now of how many people have been killed. That number had been calculated at nearly 200, but Kyrgyzstan's acting leader, Rosa Utembayeva, says the death count is likely 10 times that, closer to 2,000 in reality. Now, the son of the ousted President Kurman Bakiev is now in the UK. Maxim Bakiev is seeking asylum and has been granted temporary admission. But there are many more refugees who are able to get no further than the Kyrgyz-Uzbek border. A U.S. envoy visited some of them on Friday. He shared their stories with our own Matthew Chance.
We know about 90% of the refugees are women and children, and all of them had terrible stories of sufferings, rapes, killings of their loved ones. So of course I expressed our sympathies for the hardships that they've suffered, and I briefed them on the assistance that we are providing to the government of Uzbekistan to help them.
You know, there's an impression here that the US is being pretty silent on this issue because it's reluctant to criticize the Kyrgyz authorities for fear of jeopardizing the US military base there.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I haven't been to Kyrgyzstan very recently, but I'm going to Bishkek right after this. And I think one of the very important outcomes of my visit is that it's clear there has to be an investigation of what happened here, because clearly there were some terrible crimes committed. And if we're ever going to assure the safe and secure return of these refugees, it's going to be very important to understand what happened so that we can prevent this kind of violence from happening in the future.
There's lots of video evidence, lots of witness testimony as well, that perhaps elements of the Kyrgyz military and police could have been involved in the killings and the pillaging that's gone on in these southern areas of Kyrgyzstan. Have you been given, or will you be seeking any assurances from the Kyrgyz government that they're going to get to the bottom of this and they're going to hold people responsible for it and bring them to justice?
Indeed, I think that's going to be a very important element, both a very substantial investigation, but also that the perpetrators be held accountable. Because, again, that will be part of the conditions that will be required to ensure the safe return of these refugees.
How satisfied are you with the response of the Uzbek authorities to this humanitarian crisis?
The Uzbek response has been very quick and very decisive. I met with a lot of the UN authorities yesterday, and they were very complimentary of all the assistance that Uzbekistan has provided so far. But of course, this is a huge task, so they're going to need a lot of international assistance, and the Obama administration is certainly committed to providing that and to helping the government to cope with this massive influx they're experiencing now.
And again, that report from our Matthew Chance. Well, Kyrgyzstan's interim president is trying her best to turn the attention here from all of the carnage onto some kind of cooperation. Rosa Utembayeva flew to the southern city of Osh, the scene of most of this weekend's bloodshed. Now, even though she implied that the real death toll may be much higher than is now thought, she chided reporters for dwelling on the country's ethnic violence.
But don't dramatize so much. We are working together now. So many people working here in the field. we sent so many people from Bishkek, sort of people's diplomacy is in the field, and you give us hope, don't punish us.
Armed Uzbek guards are still stationed at barricades that seal their neighborhoods from the rest of Osh. That city's police chief says that is going to change by midday Saturday. Local Uzbek leaders say they are willing to implement a truce.
Yes, we have agreed to a truce. People are concerned. People need to return to their homes. We need to revive the life of our people.
There are still fears, though, within the Uzbek community. Eyewitnesses are continuing to come forward. They are reporting things like the Kyrgyz military taking an active part in the slaughter that has happened. Well, here's a look at some of the other stories that are making news, and the crisis unfolding in Kyrgyzstan certainly does come as the United Nations prepares to mark World Refugee Day. The U.S. giving the UN $60 million to help Palestinian refugees. This move coming as the situation of Palestinians in Gaza remains in sharp international focus, following the deadly clash between Israeli forces and a flotilla carrying aid to Gaza. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton announced the aid package, saying it will help millions of Palestinians.
I'm pleased to announce the United States will be providing $60 million to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees. This contribution will provide critical services such as health care and improve life for 4.7 million Palestinians. But again, that is not an answer either. We have to continue working for peace, security, and reconciliation in the Middle East.
In Iraq, a car bomb kills at least 5 people, 52 others injured. Police say the car was parked outside the home of a provincial council member just north of Baghdad. The official was not hurt, but some of his family members were wounded. 4 North Korean football players turn up today after missing their country's first appearance in the World Cup in 44 years. The players simply showed up at practice after missing Tuesday's match against Brazil. FIFA officials say the team submitted a 19-player squad list instead of the usual 23. Team officials say they omitted the names of players who were sitting out the game. And here we go. England's on the ropes at the World Cup. The highly ranked squad played underdog Algeria to a scoreless draw in Group C action. That's England's second straight draw of the tournament, and it sets up a likely must-win match against Slovenia next week. There's the result. England currently stands third in the group, trailing the U.S. on the total goals scored tiebreaker. Now that 0-0 result means that the United States now really does control its destiny. For more on that and a recap of the day's action, we are joined now by Pedro Pinto. He is in CNN Johannesburg there at the Bureau, right, Pedro? The England and the U.S. matches both ended in draws, but I guess you have to say the similarities end there, don't they?
They do indeed. The United States-Slovenia game was entertaining. The Algeria-England one, not so much. Let's start with the latest match that took place here in South Africa on day 8 of the World Cup, that being England versus Algeria. You were just talking about some of the highlights from that particular game out in Cape Town, Greenpoint Stadium. It was a very disappointing performance by Fabio Capello's side. The Italian manager made 3 changes to the lineup that had drawn with the United States 1-1. David James came in for Robert Green in goal, then Jamie Carragher replaced the injured Ledley King, and Gareth Barry was in the starting lineup as well in the place of James Milner. In the second half, Capello tried to change things around. He took out Emil Heskey, who once again was disappointing. Jermaine Defoe, Peter Crouch, both of them went up front, but whatever England was trying just wasn't working. It was curious, Wayne Rooney was a shadow of himself, really didn't get many chances in this game. He was so explosive during qualifying, scored 9 goals, and so far he's fired 2 blanks in this World Cup against the United States and now against Algeria. You were mentioning, Pauline,